one of the topics I talked about up above in problem 6 in the last video is how if I write them in alphabetical order, we remember that cosine is x, sine is y, tangent is y over x. But then we also have our reciprocal functions. So the secant is just the reciprocal. Remember, reciprocal just means flip it. Flip cosine. The cosecant is just flipping sine. And then the cotangent would just be to flip tangent. Okay, so here they want the exact value. So if they are talking about cosine, remember we said cosine is x. This is where our unit circle comes into play, and we're going to actually give you the unit circle on the test, so don't worry about copying it down to your note card. So cosine at 3 pi over 4, let's go to our unit circle. If 3 pi over 4 is right here, we just want the x value for cosine, so we're using negative root 2 over 2. And that'll be my answer. Well, how about negative 3 pi over 4? Okay, if positive 3 pi over 4, I would get to that by going up into the second quadrant, up and around. I just want to reverse direction, so I still want to go 2 quadrants, but down and around. So now I'm at the middle one in quadrant 3. We still want cosine though. So the middle one, there's where I started out. Remember, I'm going to the middle one, because think about it. This is negative 1 pi over 4, negative 2 pi over 4, negative 3 pi over 4 if you're using that counting rule. And again, if I want x, I just want to use that negative root 2 over 2 again for x because they ask us for the cosine. Sine, now this time I'm referring to the y value. But again, they're dealing with negatives. Well, we don't actually have negatives on our unit circle, but try to envision where the positive 2 pi over 3 would be. So if we're using our counting rule, 1 pi over 3, this is 1 pi over 3. 2 pi over 3 is this way. So we're just increasing 1 in the numerator. Okay, so I'm going to do that same thing, go down and around, but you want to focus on the ones that are over 3. Okay, so if I'm going in my negative down and around, this is negative 1 pi over 3. Keep going. This would be negative 2 pi over 3. This over here would be negative 3 pi over 3 because that reduces to 1. Right up at the top would be negative 4 pi over 3, but again, we don't need that. We just need this one down here. And this time they want the y value because they ask us for the sine, so negative root 3 over 2. Sine, so the y value at 5 pi over 3. 5 pi over 3 is actually already on our unit circle, so we don't have to worry about reversing directions. Just find 5 pi over 3, which is right here. And again, they want the y value, so you just want to use that negative root 3 over 2. Secant, remember that pairs up with cosine, so we want to flip the x value. So just find 3 pi over 4 on our unit circle. There's 3 pi over 4, and we want to flip cosine. So that means that the plain old 2 would go to the top, the square root of 2 goes to the bottom. Don't lose your negative. Alright, we can't leave it like this though. We got to get the root 2 out of the bottom. So we're going to multiply by root 2 over root 2, making this 2 root 2 over plain old 2. Again, don't lose your negatives, and the 2's will reduce, and my final answer will just be negative root 2. So again, secant means flip x, because it pairs up with cosine. They're reciprocals of each other. So at 3 pi over 2, we want to flip x. Here's 3 pi over 2. X is just 0. If I flip 0, though, and 0 goes to the bottom, we're going to have to say undefined. So it was 0 over 1, and when we flip it, the 0 goes to the bottom. Okay, cosecant means flip y, because it's really pairing up with sine, and sine is y. So go to 7 pi over 6. Which is right here. We want to flip the y value. So the y value is negative 1/2. If I flip that, it'll become negative 2 over 1, which reduces to negative 2. Negative 5 pi over 6, so again, that's that negative. If you think about positive 5 pi over 6, there's positive 5 pi over 6 right here. Negative 5 pi over 6 would just be, instead of going up and around 150 degrees, we want to go down and around. So notice how if I'm looking at the positive one, I stop just before I get to that 180 mark. So same idea, but I'm going to stop just before I get to 180, going down and around. Okay, so this one right here. And again, they want me to flip y, because cosecant pairs with y. So we're going to flip our y value, and it ends up being the same thing. Negative 2 over 1, and negative 2 over 1 just reduces to negative 2.